these quickly. There's some questions that you can ask if you're a writer and you go to a conference somewhere, or you snag a breakfast or a lunch meeting or sit down at a Starbucks sometime with an agent. And it's fine to ask questions. Hey, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been aging? How many contracts have you negotiated? Who do you represent? What houses have you done deals with? What sort of authors do you represent, or what sort of projects do you represent? What do you like to read? What was a book that you sold and that you really loved? What's unique about your particular literary agency? Because again, different agents and different agencies are strong in different areas. I know some people who used to be lawyers and they're great at contracts, but they're not that great, frankly, at editorial stuff. And I know people who used to be editors and now they're agents and they're great at the editorial side, but sometimes maybe not as strong at negotiation. So just ask, what's your best skill? What's unique? Always ask if there's a hidden fee or an upfront cost or any charges. And the reason you do that is because there are some agents who will say, I'll read your book if you send it to me with a check for $50 or a check for $100. I'll read it and get back to you. And I'm here to tell you, if anybody ever says that to you, get up and walk away. Don't pay to have some agent review your proposal. That's, in my view, that's a scam. Find out if there are any hidden fees. I know somebody who was working, this is a true story, by the way, Chrissy. I know somebody who was working with a guy who claimed to be an agent, said that he would shop her book, help her get it ready, and he was helping her get it ready, and then he charged her editorial fees. Well, I'm helping with the editing, so you need to pay me for editing. And then, I'm going to shop it for you, but you have to pay some of my travel costs. And then, hey, I'm going to this conference, but it costs this much, and if you'll help pay for that. And then it was, I've shopped this around, nobody wants it. Let me help you get it ready, and we'll post it on Amazon, and you can self-publish it. I'm not exaggerating.
Oh, wow.
She spent $32,000 on this guy.
Oh, my God.
In the end, she got nothing.
No deal, no nothing. Oh, my God.
Nothing.
Wow.
So that's one of the reasons why it's like, just ask. Any hidden fees, any charges, any upfront costs? Are you charging back expenses? Because you want to find out. Because typically, an agent makes 15% of whatever the book makes. And so, if you write your book, and you write your book, and it's called How to Be a Podcast Star, and you do this great book, and everybody wants to read it, and we sell it to Simon & Schuster for $100,000. 85% of that goes to you, and 15% goes to the agent. Traditionally, that's what happens.
Okay.
And that's why you have to make sure that the agent knows what they're doing, and that there's going to be value. And obviously, if the agent can do their job, and they can protect you and get a great contract, they can pitch it to people, they can actually land you a deal, then it's worth 15% too. But if the agent does nothing, you have to ask, why am I paying this person? And it's why I work with a small group of people, because the fact is I have to be very careful who I choose to work with, because I can't afford, this is how I make my living. So if I take your book, I work with you for, let's say I work with you for 6 months, and we work and try, and it never lands. I make nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
so I have to be careful about who I choose to work with. So that's why just asking some questions. Sometimes, sometimes even just asking the agent, have you ever worked in publishing? Have you ever done any editing or writing? So there's a couple of things that I thought you'd find helpful.
Oh my gosh. No, that is amazing, because I think that, honestly, just talking about the finance piece is a kind of a taboo area. Sometimes people don't really want to tell you what those charges look like, or especially if you're dealing with smaller agencies sometimes, or even big ones. It's kind of like, that's a personal thing, or it's one-on-one, and I think authors have a hard time of trying to get a grasp of what is going to cost me to work with someone, or maybe why people are fearful to even try to step out and connect with someone, so they just don't have a clue. It's just kind of like a blind area, but you can definitely get hurt. And so I'm really glad that you shared that, because I'm sure many of us, if someone was like $50 to read it, we're like, okay, here's the $50, so I want someone to read it. You know what I mean? So I think because that desire to just to try to get it out there, you're like willing. It's like, oh, it's like an application fee. So to hear that that's probably not the best route to go, or you should stay away from it, is imperative. I really appreciate that you even shared that, because most people wouldn't even have a clue. We wouldn't even think it was a big deal to do something like that. So that was
and there are a bunch, like with any business like this, there are a bunch of scam artists. There are people who I know. I know a couple of people who claim to be agents. I honestly don't know that they've ever actually sold a book to a publisher, but they've made a bunch of money doing, charging people for readings. So it's like, yes, send me your manuscript and $100 and I'll read it. And, it's a scam to be just like say, get up and walk away. That's the best thing. Just get up and walk away.
Man, that is perfect. That alone is worth listening to this whole interview, because I just know in my heart people just don't know that, because it's, like I said, it's like an area just kind of that blindsides people. So really just with another area that I feel like is important to, for authors to know, because we hear a lot about branding, we hear a lot about trends and what's in the market and what's selling, what's not selling. We hear, branding is a huge buzzword in the industry, or what's trending, what's selling, what's hot, what's not. And a lot of writers are kind of in that tug between, do I try to write to fit what's trending, or do I write what I really feel is inside of my heart? So the question here is, what do you see as trending right now? Like, what's kind of popular? What do you think agencies are looking for? And then also, do you feel like it's important for authors to try to fit the mold of what's selling, or is it more important to just find your own unique message and just go with that regardless if it looks like it's hot right now or not?
Well, that is a great question, because I think a lot of writers struggle with the notion of, do I chase the market or not?
Yep.
So I've been doing this a long time. I worked my way up. I was an editor and a senior editor at houses. I was I was an associate publisher at Time Warner in the old Time Warner book group. I've been agenting for years. And my feeling is, I think an author has to write the stories they've been given. And here's what I mean by that. If you are a novelist, I really believe a novelist is given stories. There's certain things that they like, certain things that they're interested in, and I think they have to write those stories that they've been given. And if you're a nonfiction writer, you're probably writing because God has given you some kind of message. It's what's on your heart. It's what's in your mind. It's funny when you look at your church. I don't know where you go to church. I don't know what your church is like, but I know something about it. There is always somebody in your church that no matter what you're discussing, the budget, the facilities, the events you're planning, no matter, they will want to know, how does this affect the youth group? Because, there's always somebody like that. And then there's somebody else who's always like, no matter what you're discussing, there's somebody in your church who's like, well, how does this affect missionaries or people overseas or something? Because there's just some people, that's just what's on their heart. And
that's just their thing.
I think you have to write what you've been given. I think we're all called to different things. People have asked me, I've done a lot of writing, but now I write my blog, but I used to do a lot of collaborative writing and helping people and everything. And people ask me now, why don't you do more of your books? Well, you know what? I never really thought that was my calling. My calling is much more helping other writers than it is, being the star writer. And, and like not everybody is, go back to your church setting. God calls some people to be the pastor, but He doesn't call everybody to be the pastor.
That's true. Very true.
And He calls some people to be soloists in the choir, and then He calls some people to be sort of backups, but not to be soloists in the choir. And then He calls some people, trust me, He calls some people to not be in the choir. You know,
That's very, very true.
you know, and so, you know, back to publishing for a minute, I always say to people, look, I think what you have to do is you have to think about what's the message you've been given. Now, sometimes you come up with an idea and it's a great fit for right now because there's a trend on it right now. I mean, you know, for example, I mean, I'll use one example. A few years ago, cozy mysteries. Now, a cozy mystery means there's a crime committed, usually a murder, and there's a bunch of characters involved. It's in a small setting, and there's some amateur sleuth who figures it out. You know, old Agatha Christie books were all cozy mysteries and stuff. You know, a few years ago, they were dead. I mean, I couldn't give them away. Now suddenly cozies, well, they're all the rage. Everybody wants a cozy. You know, a couple of years ago in young adult fiction, what's called YA fiction, everybody was telling these dystopian stories about, you know, the future, Hunger Games and Divergent and everything. Yeah. And everybody's telling these dystopian stories about, you know, this is what the future is going to be like and the government takes over and everything. Right now, you know, if you could write a great dystopian novel and nobody would care because there's just not a market for it right now. On the nonfiction side, that happens as well. You know, we went through a period of time where there just wasn't any market for marriage books. And the reason was because we had 3 or 4 big names that were writing on how to have a great marriage. And it pretty much cornered the market. And there really wasn't space for somebody new. However, that's opened up now. I think every generation needs its own voices. You know, when I'm 59, and when my kids were small, everybody in the church they were all reading, you know, James Dobson. And, you know, I've got a son now who has a little girl. I don't think he cares what James Dobson has to say because James Dobson is an 80-year-old man. What do 80-year-old men know about babies? You know, I mean, every generation needs its own voices. And so what happens is somebody will be popular for a while and then they'll fade and then new voices step up. And so that's why I think you have to write to your passion. I think you have to write the message you've been giving and then trust that God's going to use that. And I will say, I've always believed that God is not calling us to success. Now, he'll call some people to success. He'll say to some people, hey, you know, you are going to be whatever, a professional athlete, and you're going to make, you know, $10 million a year and everything. But then he says to somebody else, you know, you're going to be a really good baseball player. You're never going to be a star, but you're going to be really good. And I need you to be obedient to it. And it's the same with singers. There's some singers who are great, and then there's some singers who are, you know, pretty good. And we hear great singers. If you go to church and you listen to your choir, you regularly see great singers. But all of us in the church have known all kinds of great singers who had wonderful, lovely voices and did stuff in church, but they never recorded an album or became a star or something. And that's okay. God's not calling everybody to giant success. Sometimes he calls a pastor to pastor a mega church of 20,000 people, and sometimes he calls a pastor to some small town in the Midwest to pastor 50 folks. And I think he's more concerned about the obedience than he is the fact that somebody, you know, didn't become a star. So I would say, look, if you're a writer and you've got a message, you need to write that. You need to do the best job you can. Don't insist on, you know, making $1 million. Or don't feel that success is only if you hit the New York Times list. Because I think even just as important as success, or maybe even more important of success, is significance. The notion that God gave me a message and I wrote it down, and it's going to be significant in somebody's life. So even if it's only read by, you know, friends and family and people in my church who love me, but it means something to them, and maybe it changes the life in that way, well, that's okay, because God's Because God wants us to live significant lives. Okay, I'll stop preaching before you.
No, that is.
You'll take an offering here in a minute.
No, listen, I know. I'm ready. I'm ready to sow a seed right now because that just really speaks so much, especially